All right, welcome to Grid Talk. My name is Jawad, and today we are here to review the Canadian Grand Prix of 2026. And joining me, as always, I've got a trio of Grid Talk co-hosts. We'll start off with Owain Medford. Hello.
Hello.
We've got Tom Downing.
Tom Downing, Tom Downey. Hello.
I said Downey.
Sorry, mate. Yes, hello. Good evening.
And of course, Tom Horrox as well. Hello to you all.
Hello.
And yeah, let's get stuck into it because this is the first race we've had in a while again. It seems we've had a very truncated start to the season for various reasons, but the Canadian Grand Prix has been run and won. It's four in a row for Andrea Kimi Antonelli, who becomes the first driver in F1 history to, since their maiden win, have won four consecutively. So we'll start off with you, Owain, and it was an interesting weekend for the Mercedes drivers in the fact that I feel like it's the first time we've seen them really get the gloves off this weekend. We've got the sprint to touch on as well. Are you seeing shades of Hamilton versus Rosberg with these two? Is it going to get spicier as the season goes on, or will Toto Wolff and co step in to kind of control the fight moving forwards?
Yeah, I think they're definitely in that. If we liken it to Hamilton and Rosberg, they're probably in sort of Bahrain 2014. Obviously, it was great battling between them. I think clearly Kimi had the speed over Russell. He just seems to have that little extra edge, or at least did today, and seemed to a little bit in the sprint as well. And Russell, by comparison, looked sort of more composed maybe, but did seem to be taking more out of his car just before he stopped. Owing to his reliability troubles, we did see that there was sort of grading on the front of the tyres, so which I don't think we saw on Antonelli's car by comparison. So I think there was definitely an element of really pushing Russell and pushing him really, really quite hard. I did think to myself at a certain point, you know what, these guys are going to crash. They're going to take each other out if no one steps in. You know, things are getting just that little bit too frenetic. We were approaching sort of a kind of Barcelona 2016 kind of scenario, just with how hard they were both pushing. It's really easy to make a mistake like that, and I just had this horrible feeling that if they continued, we were going to have an accident between the two of them. So in a way, I'm kind of glad that didn't happen, because hopefully we'll still get this racing. But I certainly felt that, yeah, there was kind of no holds barred there, and Mercedes were on the verge of stepping in if things didn't calm down.
Yeah, they definitely have experience in that department, and it's almost been 10 years since they've had to really manage an internal title fight as well with the drivers. But on the other side of the garage, Tom Downey, will come to you. George Russell DNF'd, which was rather unfortunate, and he said after the race too that it's Kimi's title to lose now, and that's a very surprising thing to hear this early in the season. We're only five Grand Prix into the season, so do you really believe that, that is the case? And do we look at last year and the cautionary tale of Oscar Piastri, who led the championship for three-quarters of the season nearly and lost it in the last one? It's not really over, is it, Tom?
It's never over until it's over, and until we cross the line in Abu Dhabi with a checkered flag, provided that it's the last race of the year this year with this year's calendar, we won't know for certain who the World Drivers' Champion is going to be. It is a huge hit for George, especially this early on in the season. You know, he looked, I'd say, probably on course to win the race. Canada is a very, very strong circuit of his. He's won, I think, once and got pole at least twice, not counting sprints as well. Granted, this is the first Canadian sprint, I think. So I can understand why he's thinking that. He's probably immensely frustrated. He was putting up some very, very robust, shall we say, defending against Kimi. Defending which, I'm going to be perfectly honest, if that defender was against him, he would have been whinging like a little sod on the radio. But when he does it, it's absolutely fine. So, just go figure, innit? I don't like George and Russell. I love George Howson. It's way, way, way too early in the season. I remember it might have even been after Canada last year, you and I were talking. I think a few of us were chatting in our live chat Discord. And I said, is it time for McLaren to focus their attention on one driver? And you, Jawad, said to me, and I meant Oscar Piastri, and you said it's way too early in the season for that. Bear in mind, we have two fewer races completed. So there is still so much more that can happen this season. As we saw last year, a 2-point title swing can do it, or a 2-point swing can decide a title. As you've seen in 2021, it can be winner takes all. We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen in the European rounds where Kimi fell off like a stone last year. There's so much that can happen so we don't know what's going to happen. And I think it's fairly obvious that Amo Driver is going to win the title. Let's not beat around the bush. And at the minute, Kimi is absolutely in sort of, I was going to say in the driver's seat, then I was going to say in pole position. They're both really, really bad puns. I don't mean that. But Kimi is definitely the informed driver. And Russell showed almost perhaps a bit of desperation today. And that DNF will really, really hurt him. And some of the battles, like Owen referenced as well, definitely pushing it to the extremes, I think it's fair to say. It was a point I was thinking, close enough, welcome back 2016 Mercedes Civil War. But we didn't quite see that. But we started to see, more than glimpses of it when they were like really not giving each other, never mind giving each other a millimetre at points. So it's not over. It's absolutely not over. And Russell's going to be feeling very defeated. I understand that. And, I can really empathise with him because the DNF was outside of his control. His car just like a bag of bolts and then it shut off. There's nothing he can do about that. It's not anything he did inherently wrong. We don't know what the cause of the DNF was. And who's to say that Kimi won't have that in a couple of races' time? One DNF, as we saw last year, can swing everything in one way or another way. So it's not championship over. We've still got, 15 odd races to go this year, maybe a few, plus I think another 3 or 4 sprints. So it's not over. It's not over. And Russell has that bit more experience, and Kimi shows some of his inexperience today. So the season is long. We still doesn't feel like we've truly got started yet because we had the April break. So let's see what happens over the coming months, and we might revisit this conversation in October when Kimi's wrapped up the title, but I highly, highly, highly doubt it.
Yeah, the season is long, so plenty of racing to play out, and hopefully now that we move beyond this month, we get some back-to-back races. I think for the first time in a long time, I've never wanted a triple header so desperately because we just really haven't had any momentum this season, but that's all been out of our control. We'll come to you, Tom, and Tom Horrox, we'll come to you. We came into this race off the back of Miami, where McLaren really emerged as the second best team behind Mercedes. They were buoyed by an upgrade that they bought. Mind you, Mercedes brought their own upgrade for this race. And for the most part, McLaren did have a decent weekend. Lando Norris, he challenged in the sprint, and it looked like he may even overhaul George. But the race was a completely different story for them. I mean, is it fair to say they completely bottled it by starting off on the intermediate tyres? I mean, that's some Ferrari-level strategy there when there was no moisture on the track. But not only that, we had Lando retire with a reliability failure, and then of course Oscar Piastri acting like a bit of a bonehead with that move on Albon that cost him or got him a 10-second time penalty. What a disaster of a race.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely was bottled. There was a few things about the race. Like McLaren made a bold move, and they knew that their tyres, with the temperatures and the conditions, they were not going to be able to be competitive in this race. Norris said after the race, so he could well be putting a spin on it. He said that they were having real troubles with tyre warm-up and they were going to be nowhere in the race on pace, so they had to try something. So, I mean, if you're on the wrong road, turn back, right? You don't just keep going down a blind alley. And they had 2 opportunities with that. I don't know what was going on with the formation lap situation there. I think the first time round, it wasn't very well communicated, was it? The graphics didn't come up that it was an aborted start. It should go amber lights on the gantry to inform people of that, and that just never happened. So I'm not sure exactly what went wrong there, but we know that it was, who was it? It was Lindblad, wasn't it? I think had a problem on the grid. So that's what caused that, and then they didn't get him out of the way in time, so had a second formation lap. So our Lord and Saviour Lance Stroll in his home race pulled a blinder there, realised he was on the wrong tyre and just came straight in the pits and came off it. Now, I think from the first formation lap, you do it then. That's the time to do it. They would have been the first car in the queue. But when they went with the second start, Piastri came in at the end of the first lap, Norris at the end of the second lap. Clearly, that was better for Norris because he came out in 14th. Piastri came out dead last behind Stroll. So they would have been, if they had done it Before that, then maybe Norris has gained one position by doing these 2 laps, but it's definitely the wrong decision. Now, because of that decision, they've ended up in the pack. Norris likely would have retired anyway, no matter what happened, but he still made a mistake that could have ended his race, and that probably wouldn't have happened had the team been racing from the start. Piastri's accident definitely wouldn't have happened if they'd have been racing from the start on the correct tyre. So it was definitely an error from that side of things. But I've got more of a problem with the just not identifying that they're on the wrong strategy and fixing it. Like when Lance Stroll is on the same strategy as you and then jumps off it, you're like, to go onto the same strategy as everyone else. It's just like, you know what, maybe there is something wrong here. And this is probably nothing to do with this, but Zach Brown is in Indianapolis at the moment. Would his influence in the paddock, would that have made any difference? I don't know, but I just feel like maybe it would have done slightly. Would he have been just that calming influence, that race's instinct? Would there have been I know he doesn't call strategy and he does trust Andrea Stella, but I just feel maybe. But there's definitely, I mean, if Ferrari hadn't have also made a bit of a boo-boo today as well, then you would say that McLaren looked like they might be replacing Ferrari on the old strategy bandwagon here. But they're certainly not optimized, because this happens far too often. It happened a lot last year, happened a lot the year before. They're still not on the level of a championship winning side from the strategy point of view. But I mean, the question really today is, who made the more mistakes? Was it McLaren? Was it Oscar? Was it Lando? Like, they all made lots of mistakes, and all through the field we saw Antonelli making mistakes, we saw Russell making mistakes, even Hamilton made a mistake. I say even Hamilton, but Hamilton made a mistake. Max made a couple of small errors. So throughout the entire field it was really difficult, but the McLaren were the only team that made an absolutely horrendous error. So yeah, I think McLaren definitely to blame for this one more than anything else.
It was the opposite of a 5-star performance from McLaren, you got to say. And if you enjoy this podcast, we would love you to take 5 to leave us a 5-star review, in fact. Also, if you're listening and aren't currently subscribed to the channel, please consider helping us out with a like and a subscribe. But we'll transition over to what we could call potentially a 5-star performance, even though he made his own errors. Owain, best weekend for Lewis Hamilton in a Ferrari, arguably, it must be said, culminating in that P2 finish. It was great seeing him go wheel to wheel with his old foe Max Verstappen again as well, albeit a bit more behaved than we've seen them in the past. And yeah, while Charles Leclerc got the better of him in the sprint, you got to say in the Grand Prix, Hamilton came alive, and Montreal is one of his more favoured circuits. Is this a weekend that we can take some positives away and expect better results to come from them in the future?
I think as a performance, it's obviously, outstanding, from at least as the Grand Prix is, just looking at the Grand Prix, sorry. The sprint, I feel like uncovered, with the warmer temperatures at least, uncovered a weakness in the Ferrari. And I think bearing in mind their ability to get the tyres working, particularly compared to the Red Bull, they seemed a little bit worse than the Red Bull on the softs. By comparison, that was the only, obviously there was the Mercedes streaking away out in front of them, but when we moved onto the mediums, the Ferrari just seemed to be able to get those to work a lot better, particularly with Lewis Hamilton. And I think knowing what they knew from the sprint, where they needed to manage the tyres, they did that quite well in that first stint. And then the second stint, just the ability to have tyre temperature on this particularly cold day really, really suited the Ferrari. And that's something I think we sort of need to watch out for, is that, yes, they did have a great performance today, obviously a second and a fourth place, which is kind of the bare minimum really for Ferrari, in my opinion. There's sort of an element to me where I just think if we get really hot races, I'm thinking Austria and things like that, or Hungary, we're just going to have these issues where, unless they get on top of what seems to maybe be a thing with the tyres, with how the car uses its tyres at least, they may start to go backwards in comparison to teams like Red Bull, who can make their tyres last, or don't necessarily, or are a bit kinder on their tyres maybe. So that's something that, that's a little bit of a cautionary tale, I think, for Ferrari to keep an eye on. But otherwise, yeah, it's a pretty good performance out of what is ultimately, I think, a fight for second at this point, with how fast the Mercedes just seems to be in this current state of upgrades and things like that. Hamilton, yeah, there was just you could just see that there was just that extra amount of ability that he just seems to be able to access when everything's going well for him. Obviously, that's the same for all drivers, but you can kind of saw the old Lewis just seemed to be able to race more, just seem comfortable in the car, really wanting to throw it around, and actually having. I know it's a little thing to pick up on, but it's the small little mistakes that you do see where he's actually pushing the car. Whereas maybe you wouldn't have seen that because he was driving in within himself, and I think that's what we're seeing more of from Ferrari. And not just that, it just doesn't seem to be a one-off performance. This seems to be something that he's feeling. He's in the team, he's in the car. He's more able to access it, and it's not some kind of it's not lucking into the performance window. So I think this is. As much as there's alarm bells in other places with the Ferrari, I think it's seeming to be a fairly good performance that's a sign of good things to come.
Yeah, you'd hope so. I mean, it's slowly getting to that stage where the gap between championships is getting close to what the previous record was before Schumacher won his first for Ferrari. But speaking of good performances, Tom Downey, first podium, can you believe it, of 2026 for Max Verstappen? It's not usual that we wait this long in the season to see him on the rostrum. But yeah, as I mentioned earlier, he had a good battle with his old foe in Lewis. And yeah, it just seems, even though he's had so much bad luck this season with the Nürburgring 24-hour race as well, being cruelled in the sort of last stages of it, that he seems a lot more, not happier, but just seems a lot more chill this weekend with the regulations and everything. How would you sum it up? And also his teammate Isa Kadja finishing top 5 as well for a solid haul of points for Red Bull.
Yeah, I didn't know if we were even going to see Max on the podium this year. I'll be real. I know that sounds racially defeatist, but Red Bull, the fourth quickest team, and I'd argue some weekends they haven't even been fourth quickest. Max obviously benefited from some DNFs, a lot of DNFs in front of him, with obviously George, his car just like taking an early bath, and then Piastri, committing an act of terrorism down into the hairpin, and then Landa's car saying night as well. It definitely helps, but it feels like that Red Bull team and Max, and by extension Hadjar. I know Hadjar got, I think, 20 seconds penalties for driving like a, can't say that on the podcast, but yeah, putting all that aside, it does feel like the team is getting a bit better. The Red Bull Ford power unit is obviously a good power unit. It's. I think a lot of people were perhaps talking it down. Sort of saying what are Ford going to do? Let's not forget that the inner workings of that Red Bull power unit is still the original intellectual property from Honda when they came over to Red Bull back in 2019, and Red Bull effectively bought out all of that and created Red Bull powertrains. Ford is doing the electrics, the sort of hybrid systems, and Red Bull powertrains, which is the Honda side, the old Honda side, obviously not the Honda that's in the Aston now. There's a good engine in that car. The chassis is overweight, as we know. It's it's not that chassis we saw, I think in China, it was the best part of 20 kilos overweight, aren't we all? And it certainly looked like it was just like slow, heavy. You could see the excess weight, like me, in the corners, where it was certainly sort of like looking like it was struggling to get around. Red Bull have definitely made some upgrades. We saw a lot of upgrades in Miami. The car looked a bit better today. It still wasn't great. Max is complaining about losing tyre temp a lot, so there's more work to be done. However, I do wonder that if Red Bull can keep on top of this, we might start to see more podiums in the year. We're not going to be looking at a 2025, certainly not a 2025 sort of Max sort of type of year where he started and he was nowhere and then eventually came back to within millimeters of a title. We're not going to see that this year. Let's just be real. Hadjar looked good as well. It's nice to see Hadjar doing well and Max doing well, because we know how long that second seat has been cursed for. I thought we had that in Miami, but Hadjar definitely seemed to bounce back. So it's a good one. I don't know if Max. I think Max might win like a sprint or something. I just can't see him winning a full Grand Prix. He has circuits where he's very, very good, but that Merc is just so strong this year, and it's only getting stronger. I mean, I'll be more than happy to eat my words. As we all know, I'm a big Max fan, but I'm just being realistic. I think Merc will take the bulk of the race wins, with McLaren taking a few as well. Maybe Ferrari snatching one or two. I just can't see Red Bull winning, unfortunately.
Pessimistic, realistic, who knows? We'll see as the season plays out. There is still plenty of time, and if anyone can bag some wins, it's Max Verstappen. But a career best performance, we've got to say, for Franco Colapinto, Tom Horrocks. One of the first weekends in a while we've seen Pierre Gasly, the esteemed Frenchman, be outperformed from start to finish by a teammate, and of course a Colapinto no less. He scored a career best finish, or he was promoted to a career best finish in Miami with P7. He's done one better with P6 this time in the Grand Prix. And we've talked a lot of let's say, negative things about Alpine on this show in the past, but it seems like they're actually doing quite well this year, and they've got two drivers who are scoring points. I mean, what's happened?
How very dare you? I've always been an Alpine fan. I've never said a bad word against them, ever. I'm actually really glad for once you've given me Alpine and Colapinto, because normally that would have been the poison chalice of the podcast, right? Who gets Alpine this week? It was the old Haas and the old Sauber waiting for the Audi money, wasn't it? It was just, what do we talk about for this lot? But no, I'm actually really glad, because I'm not an Alpine fan generally. I don't like the owners. I don't like the person who's currently running the team. I don't like either of the drivers particularly. I'm not massively against Gasly. In my predictions, I had him to be P5 or better, so obviously I rate him, and I'm just not a fan of Colapinto's fans because they annoy me. But I'm really glad for Franco, because he was putting in some great performances in 2023 for when Sargent got dropped. Was it 20 or 24? 24, sorry, when Sargent got dropped. All the years are rolling into one. And then last year was just a bit of a joke, and he was completely written off and it was a laughing stock, and it's not really fair. So I'm really glad, because this has been a comprehensive drubbing. Gasly has now quietly kind of been put in the corner, certainly in this race, and Miami as well. Colapinto was just the better driver, and this is now becoming a bit of a trend. He's been threatening to do this since towards the end of last year. He wasn't getting the results, but the performances were definitely there, and he looked like he was starting to edge back towards Gasly and then starting to outperform him at times, and the confidence is definitely coming back. The performances are coming back, and I think this is great for Alpine, because they had two drivers in the points today. They got 12 points today, so they're the third highest scoring team. Ferrari scored the most points, weirdly, but then Alpine are not far behind them. So well done. It's a really good result for Alpine. They're now comfortable fifth in the championship. They're on the up. Let's be honest, they are going to be fifth at best in the championship, and that's got to be their target. But coming from 10th, that's really strong. And Franco, I'm really happy that he's actually seems to be fulfilling the potential that he showed at Williams. So it's certainly driving up his price. So either Williams can't lose out of this, because let's be honest, Williams are likely to lose potentially Albon or Sainz at some point towards the end of the season to another team when silly season kicks in. And if Franco is in form, it's an easy decision. I believe he's at Alpine for 2 years. I believe that's the contract. So they've got someone else they can just plug in Colapinto if he is back in the form that he was showing at Williams, and then he can start to build his career from there. He might not want to go back to Williams the way Alpine have turned it around now, but I do believe it's a bit of Alpine have given themselves a false ceiling with this, so it's gonna jump them up to fifth in the championship, and they're gonna get some better results and not be a laughing stock anymore. But it's not going to push them up into championship winning contention anytime soon. That's not going to come until at least 2030, and I don't think it'll even come there, to be honest. So it's a false dawn for Alpine, but I'm glad that Franco's getting some good results again.
Just need another 5-year plan. That always does it for the Enstone team. So we'll come to some closing thoughts from everyone then, and some of us in our live chat said or suggested this could be potentially race of the season. We haven't had that many races yet to draw much out of, but there's been a lot said in general about the regulations. I remember Tom Horrocks, we spoke after the first race and you were very passionate in defending the regulations, and I still stand by everything you said, but we've had so many changes happen, changes being talked about for next year, and potentially manufacturers being opposed to going to a 60-40 split instead of the 50-50 split. But we've had a really, really entertaining race and sprint at one of the circuits that was deemed to be more demanding on energy. We would have thought that, they would have bottomed out or super clipped a lot more here, but we had a fairly entertaining race. I mean, are we happy to leave things as they are, or do you all firmly believe, we'll start with Owain and work our way around that, there needs to be more refinements done? Because, the way I see it, it actually seemed okay. And I think we should just, pick and stick to what we've got.
Personally, I'm of the opinion that we shouldn't have. I think maybe the changes were required. At this point, I think they're in a good place. I don't think we need to start messing with them more. The teams are gonna. I mean, we've been saying it for months now. The teams are going to figure it out. They're going to want the easiest thing possible, obviously, and they will figure it out. They'll work out how to get the best out of the power units in the state that they are in across the circuits of the calendar. And to be honest with you, they'd just rather not have to make changes that they don't have to. Obviously, it's easier to, it's much easier to continue with something that's familiar and with kind of more akin to what they've been doing previously than it is to figure out something new when you can spend that time, I don't know, putting extra downforce in the car or something like that. I think this racing has been really good. I think maybe it has got a little more, a little bit better maybe since the tweets. But apart from that, I think we're in a pretty good place with, at least with the power units, and I think it makes things interesting in it, and it really leaves it down to the driver of where they think they can get away with using more energy and things like that. We're still having battles between cars. I mean, it did, kind of end up in a place where we only had 2 battles on track between cars, but that's been the case in previous seasons as well. So personally, I'm of the opinion that we're in a great place. I think this was a great race. I think all of them have been pretty good, prior to this, but I think this is probably race of the season thus far. I mean, there's still 17 to go, so as the schedule currently stands. So hold your horses on that one. But ultimately, I think this is a great start, and I don't think we need to be making huge changes unless we go to 60-40 and it's absolutely brilliant.
Tom?
I think Canada's definitely in contention for race of the season. We are quite soon into the season, a lot more races to come. But, I think the sprints yesterday gave us a taste of what we could have had today. Yeah, it was really good. It delivered once again. In terms of actual regulations, Owen, you made a very good point, and I am inclined to agree that teams are beginning to figure them out. The subtle tweaks we've had, yeah, they're looking pretty good. So, we're seeing less of this sort of incredible sort of deceleration. Maybe it's clever TV, I don't know. I haven't thought about it as much. I haven't noticed it as much. But yeah, it kind of, so far, definitely race of the season, as it definitely throws its hat in the ring for most years.
And Tom, how do you feel about it? Things 5 races in.
Yeah, I'm still of similar opinions to the start of the season. There are some elements of it that I do find a little bit jarring, which I think I may have said on the Australian Grand Prix podcast anyway. But I would love to rerun Australia as we have things now and just see how much better it is with these tweaks with the regulations. But one thing that we do that does need to improve over time, and I think it obviously will do. We had 4 cars finish on the lead lap today, and that can't carry on. Like, that is with a couple of ESCs as well. We didn't have a full safety car, but we did have a few interruptions. But that's a big field spread, and it is basically the Mercedes and whatever car is in the sweet spot that contending for these races. And that is not going to lead to a conducive fight, because eventually we're going to see one of those Mercedes drivers get into an unassailable lead or become the dominant force, and the other one's going to be swept away, and then the championship's going to peter out. And yeah, it's a big gap obviously up there at the moment, but we saw that overturned in a couple of races last year with Verstappen. We saw Norris close down a similar gap to Piastri. Took him a little bit longer, but it still happened. So it's definitely not over from that side of things. But from a regulations standpoint, I think the most important thing they need to do is these cars dynamically are very good to watch. They're the best in a generation. They are back to where they were towards the end of the previous era before the turbo hybrids. They're good to watch. They're fun to drive around. The drivers prefer them, and you can drive close. Look how long Antonelli and Russell were in each other's gearboxes for. Look how long Hamilton was in Verstappen's gearbox for. Last year, that would have been 2 or 3 laps, and then tyres would have overheated. They would have fallen back. So I think it's really, really important they protect this aero formula. They don't allow people to just keep putting all these things on. I don't know if there's some kind of mechanical thing they can do where they can actually measure what turbulence these cars are creating and say, no, that creates too much turbulence, that's illegal. That's the kind of thing that they need to do. They have to protect this and not just panic swap to V8s because there's a few people, there's a few gammons out there that are shouting too loudly. You got to protect what we got here. We've got some really close racing. We've got some really good racing. Yes, there are problems with it, and yes, these changes they're looking to bring in, providing the manufacturers don't all politic their way out of it and then say, oh no, we got to have this, we can't have that because we want to carry over the chassis, blah blah. They just need to all take a sensible pill. I heard the theory that they were going to have to reduce race lengths by maybe a lap or two. That's fine. When I heard that they were going to reduce laps, I was like, oh, they're going to take 10 laps off, and no, God no. But no, a lap or two, that is sensible. If it's just for one season, just so they can still keep the homologated chassis, that works fine for me. That's a stick and plaster to get us through to the following year, and then everyone can just redesign new engines, and we'll all be happy for 2 years until they bring in V8s. So, yes, I think the sport is in a good place, but everyone just needs to be sensible and do what's right for the sport and not what's right for their own performance, because we can see this being politicking in. And for the love of God, don't let Mercedes buy Alpine. Just please, I've got to get that in there. Do not let Mercedes buy Alpine. We do not want, with the greatest respect to Red Bull fans, we don't want 2 Red Bull situations on the grid. It's bad enough having one, because that's still a problem.
Yes, we don't want more AB teams, to echo what Zach Brown has said, and absolutely agree as well. It's amazing to see what happens when teams actually knuckle down and develop their cars instead of trying to fight for changes in the boardroom. So, yeah, we'll leave it at that one. And what you say about the regulations, we've got the Monaco Grand Prix coming up next, and that may be potentially the truest test of whether these regulations are a success or not, because everyone complains every year about Monaco being boring, blah, blah, blah. I don't believe in any of that. But if we have a good race in Monaco, then I think we should put all this discussion to bed. But bringing it back to Canada, driver of the day, the Grid Talk live chat poll resulted in Lewis Hamilton being voted driver of the day. I'll come to each of you. Owain, who was your driver of the day?
In my opinion, I think I've got to stick with Lewis Hamilton. I think he did an absolutely outstanding job. And it wasn't, let's not forget, it wasn't like he got past Max and then romped off into the sunset. It was, it was still difficult from that point. Once Max was in his slipstream, the tables turned a little bit, and he still had to fight for that second place. So for me, given the across the weekend, I think he had the best weekend of anybody who wasn't in a Mercedes.
I concur. Hamilton, great weekend, sort of all round, as we'll talk about tomorrow on driver ratings. But yeah, he's my driver of the day. Second, great result.
And finish soft.
Hey. For me, it is a weird situation here. I'm not going Hamilton. For me, if someone drives off track and loses a position, they can't be driver of the day. That's just my own personal rule that I set. Regardless of the good performance he had, I do agree he had a great performance. If Max had got Hamilton back, then I would have absolutely said Max Verstappen had a great race driving a car that he couldn't drive. It looked like he was going to be done by his teammate, but on the day, he absolutely outclassed his teammate. But I'm still, just because he didn't get Hamilton back, I am going to say Franco Colapinto. I just think he deserves it. I think it's a solid performance for all the reasons I've already said, and I that's what I voted on the channel. I think I was the only person to not vote Hamilton, but hey, I'm sticking with it.
Fair enough. And I think we should petition for you to become a race steward, because you know how to pick and stick to the rules. So we'll finish it off there. I'll give you all a chance to do a bit of a plug as well. Let us know what's going on. If you have anything, Owain.
I would like to plug a Grid Talk Predictions Challenge. So that's available on our Grid Talk social channels. And every week, the Grid Talk hosts predict where we think, who's we think is going to be on pole and what we think the podium is going to be, along with a few wild cards. I had an absolutely abysmal week, absolutely terrible. I didn't expect that McLaren would do that badly. I didn't expect that they'd put Inters on, and then by the end of the first formation lap, you'd be able to see that they were literally falling apart at the seams. And I've had a terrible time of it. But if you'd like to see how amazing everyone else did, then make sure you go to our Grid Talk social channels. That's available at Grid Talk UK on all the social media platforms with the app, and you'll be able to see exactly where everything shook out and how I've ruined my performance, just like George Russell, within like 5 races.
And Tom, you mentioned the driver rating show that you and I do. Did you want to tell us more about that?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So driver ratings is audio only. Everywhere you listen to the main Grid Talk show, you can listen to Jawad and myself chatting absolute 100% mathematical accuracy about our driver ratings for each weekend. And we definitely don't alter our grades based on if we like a driver or not, or if they've got a stupid haircut. So check out that. We'll be recording. Can you tell us late in the UK? Yeah, so we'll be recording that. I don't know, we'll sort that between us.
I don't know what you're talking about. Completely stick to the...
that's why, mate. I need to go to bed.
And over to you, Tom. You also co-host the Monkey Seat podcast as well.
I do occasionally when we actually get around to doing stuff. No, in all seriousness, Carlo's not had a great time of late, and there's some personal stuff going on, so we've not been able to podcast for a little while. We do keep trying, but it's not been possible. Plus, I'm changing jobs as well, so it's been a bit difficult. But when we do get together, it is a right laugh, and it's a great time. So look for the Monkey Seat wherever you find your normal podcasts. We may well do a podcast at some point this year. We predicted at the start of the season how many podcasts are we going to do this year, and I confidently predicted we would do 16. Thus far, we've done 1, so it doesn't look like we're going to hit my target of 16. So yeah, just look out for us when we do pod. It's good fun. So come and have a listen.
Yeah, and always look out for a cheeky bet that those two place, because it always ends up in nudity or something absurd. So
or not. Carl reneged on his last bet. He didn't do it.
Maybe that's why he's not done a show really this year, because he doesn't want to do it in the nud. And quickly, Grid Talk socials on the Meta platforms at Grid Talk UK. Please give us a follow. That would be much appreciated if you want more content. But also, thanks for listening, and don't forget to hit subscribe, leave a 5-star rating and write a review. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please do check out our previous shows as well. Big thank you to Jared Bradley and Holly Eagle for supporting us on Patreon. If you want to support the show further, why not sign up to our Patreon for exclusive content? Also, make sure you subscribe so you're the first to know when new content is released. We'll be back soon with plenty more F1 content. Thank you very much for listening to the Grid Talk podcast, and goodbye.